Hi, everyone. I hope you're not too tired. Unfortunately, I lost my voice, so you will not hear too much from me, but maybe that's good. Um, let's start with a show of hands. Quick question. Who here in the audience is not an A16Z partner? Yes. Two people are not. So, um, the thesis of this, or the core idea of this panel is Venture 3.0 as a paradigm shift led by DAOs for the venture space. You could look at firms like Andreessen Horowitz, A16Z as Venture 2.0 with services model, and I think all of us, we believe that DAOs have really huge implications for the VC world, and we'll talk about it. So instead of a normal intro, I wanted to ask each of you in this order to tell us about your most magical crypto experience in the last year.
Hi, everyone. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Julia. My most magical crypto experience this year was probably running my first Mirror crowdfund campaign. And I remember the feeling of going to bed the night after I published the Mirror post and waking up and realizing people had funded a project to help educate people about DAOs for like 18 ETH, which was just incredibly magical because I didn't know if anyone even cared about the subject, let alone for the internet to work its magic and find a group of people who wanted to fund the same project and collaborate on the same project.
I think it's close. Should be a bit closer, I think.
Hi, everyone.
You sure about that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, this is Mona. My magical moment, I think, was just kind of we've been a DeFi protocol in the space for nearly 5 years now. I think we were the first DeFi protocol in history to decentralize and become a DAO. And we've kind of shared a lot of frustrations over the tooling around DAOs. The time it takes to contribute to the work that a DAO needs to do because of the fragmentation in the DAO tooling space. And my magical moment over the last few months has been stop complaining and start building and maybe start contributing to some of the tooling. So that's something that was actually a really magical moment for me and something that I'm really excited about contributing towards going forward.
Can you tell us which tools you're contributing to?
So yeah, our kind of journey we've jumped around, from different tools, and at the moment we're using Gnosis Safe to interact with contracts, so at a protocol level. We're using Enzyme to manage our treasury. And then the tooling that we want to build on top of that is linked to how to make those processes and interactions much more seamless and how to get top-down, fully fledged reporting so that somebody, which is like often has been me, kind of doing this manual, tiresome work of, accounting for every single transaction the DAO has ever made in a spreadsheet, because like we are in the 21st century in Web3, we shouldn't be doing that. And basically being to automate all of that stuff and make it really easy, seamless experience for people, mainly so that DAO participation should be easy, because if it's not, then we've failed. And then we're not going to be decentralized, and only like a few people who have the time and who have enough at stake to participate are going to participate.
Thank you, thank you. I do remember Melon Protocol was one of the first DeFi or kind of DeFi DAO projects that you kind of dissolved your first entity and then you DAO'd before DAOs were cool.
Yeah, thanks for reminding. For Enzyme, for those of you who don't know, was a rebrand of Melon Protocol, and yeah, we dissolved the company behind Melon, which was Melonport, in 2019, so 2.5 years ago, and handed over to a DAO, which was originally running on Aragon and later migrated to Gnosis Safe.
Thank you. And
Hello, everyone. My name is Manasi Vora. My most magical moment essentially was launching this DAO called Komorebi DAO, where it's an investment DAO to invest in female-founded companies. And when we launched it, a lot of people were skeptical in terms of, oh, you're not going to see a lot of deal flow. There aren't enough female founders in the space. And I'm happy to say that we've broken that myth. In the last 3 months since we launched, we had over 50 female-founded companies come to us, and we've had a really strong deal flow. So I think that's been super magical to see.
yeah, actually, mine is the other side of yours. I think one of my most magical crypto moments was waking up at 1:48 a.m. to ape 6.9 ETH into your mirror campaign. And that was the start of our friendship, kind of. So, moving on to the next topic, this idea actually came from, we were talking with Julia last night about like what are some of the differences with like venture DAOs that are investment DAOs and normal VC firms. One of the core issues is value accrual, who actually has ownership. It's quite interesting that we have VCs and investors in this space who talk about ownership, but then the entity that's deploying into this ownership economy is quite centrally owned. That's kind of crazy. So what do you think about that?
I mean, obviously, I think this is kind of crazy that there are entire VC funds investing in the ownership economy and refuse to share ownership of their carry. But I think one of the big differences as we talk about decentralizing VCs is what goes into building a VC fund. And if you think about all the things that a VC fund has to be exceptional at, you have to be able to find the right founders, diligence the right founders, pick winners, and then go on to support those companies. And the way traditional VC funds work today is all of the value accrues mostly to the general partners and then their LPs. But if you think about those four functions, often it's the community that's supporting them in that. It's their friends sending them deals. It's their friends doing favors to support their portfolio companies. But none of those people who are creating all of that value share in any of the upside today. And so as we start thinking about decentralizing a VC, I think you will start to see the value creation, the value capture, and the value distribution align.
Yeah, and I think, it also goes beyond that, where traditionally in VCs, the returns that they've enjoyed over the last few decades have been captured just by a core group of privileged people who had access to being a VC, who had access to this deal flow. And now with just this, I guess, rise of DAOs that we've seen, that barrier to entry has been lowered, where anyone can enjoy these returns, be a member of an investment DAO, and really, in the true sense, empower the community to earn these returns.
You have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'll comment a little bit more on the more liquid fund space because that's where we have more expertise. But I think that basically the web 3.0 version of a venture fund or a fund, just like Julia and Manse said, dramatically reduces the barriers to entry. Costs to setting up a fund in traditional finance are like crazy. I think it's like $100,000. That's just the money. Forget about the headaches. I mean, that's what, like 3 to 6 months of headaches and trying to figure out, the space is so fragmented. You need so many different service providers. And at this point, you can basically now have a trustless relationship in liquid asset management between the manager and the investors without any trust required, which also means you can start to imagine things like anonymous fund managers as well, which is really exciting.
Yeah, thank you. To kind of summarize the thoughts here, I think what's happening with venture DAOs is it's not just that the GPs are kind of being decentralized, it's also the LPs. So it's like one of those magical moments where we have like double 10x Does it count as a 100x improvement? So you have, instead of just two GPs, you have 20, 30 members who are earning a little bit of carry. And then the funding is also coming from many small investors, which makes it more accessible. Um,
I can't hear you.
oh, you can't hear me. Yeah, we have some issues with acoustics here.
Yeah. If you face me, that's the only time I can hear you.
Okay, okay. I need to face you.
Maybe you want to sit here so I can face. Yeah.
Okay, okay. We'll change seats. Apologies. I hope tomorrow we fix the acoustic situation. So, kind of related to this point, how do you see the kind of team formation for these venture DAOs? Like you're one of them, right? Uh, how do you compare this to existing established VC firms? And tell us about your experience, the good, bad, ugly, everything.
Yeah, so it goes back to the point I was making where, the current DAO members that we have traditionally would not be able to invest in crypto companies. And then the process was super simple. If we were to go the VC route, it would have taken us months to set it up. It would have taken us, I don't know how many thousands of dollars. And we were able to do end-to-end everything within a week, from figuring out what our mission is, to identifying who the DAO members are, to raising funds and starting and just like launching this DAO. And I think that's just possible in this model as opposed to the traditional VC model. And I think the bigger advantage with DAOs or investment DAOs is the collective intelligence. Whereas in a VC fund, it's a couple people making decisions. In the DAO model, you can really leverage the knowledge of the community. So for in our example, we have investors, we have founders, we have some really amazing builders in the space who are members of this DAO, who we can truly leverage not just to find deals, but also from a portfolio support perspective. We can tap into this amazing pool of individuals to really help the companies that we are investing in. So it's not just about capital, it's also about support and services.
Mm-hmm. And this all sounds great, but if I understand correctly, none of the kind of core team members are hired full time. Is that a challenge?
Definitely, definitely. I think that's a challenge across DAOs. Doesn't matter venture DAO or not. Is how do you engage your community and how do you engage your contributors? And I think there is a role for incentivization here, where if people contribute, can we drop NFTs? Can we pay them in tokens? And I think that's something that we still are figuring it out, as to how do we really encourage everyone to contribute meaningfully and not just be a part of the multi-sig and sign transactions once in a while.
And I think what's interesting about this model is also that LPs, instead of committing for like 10 years to two people, most of the times two dudes, they have access to like a huge pool of talent who could come in and out. So I think maybe you, in 2 years, you start your own firm, but someone else in the meantime kind of starts growing into this role that you have now. And I think that that's also really interesting. One of the factors that I, I don't think it's being pitched to LPs, at least traditional LPs, that you don't have to trust, like get into a marriage for 10 years with kind of no way of getting out of it. You're locked in for 10 years. Now instead you have a kind of a huge talent pool that every year you can kind of promote the most active members, whoever is most up to date with the space. Any thoughts from you, Julia? Because I think you're also thinking about starting a more like a DAO native fund.
Well, I think one of the challenges that we're running into, because we started to decentralize our Web 2 fund, and obviously this works way better in Web 3, but one of the things that we've run into is we have such a large community that's really, really helpful, but the operations is challenging. So figuring out how do you run this in a decentralized way that's efficient and super supportive, so you can be both making good investment decisions, but also making sure that you're being super, super helpful with your portfolio companies. And so in our case, we make thousands of intros to help our portfolio companies a year. And the more the network effects spread, the harder and harder it is to keep up with. And so I think one of the big challenges that will face these investment DAOs as we scale is how do you operationalize the things that it takes to be meaningfully helpful and deliver on the promise of collectively investing and supporting companies.
I, I just, because I think Manse and Julia covered basically most of the challenges, but I'll just add to what Julia said was investment DAO are not, or the challenges that you guys have just described are not that dissimilar from the challenges we faced as a protocol DAO. And I think that that's exactly why we've decided, okay, we need to actually like start contributing towards fixing this problem, because as we grow and as we scale, it's just not sustainable to keep, ignoring operations. And actually, you need automated tooling that can make people, perform better, and that can basically like push everyone to towards the things they're good at, and not bogging them down in, hours and hours of admin and operations. So like the tools we're working towards hopefully should help alleviate some of these challenges.
I don't know if you've seen this, but someone tweeted that in, I don't know, 10 years, 5 years, community managers, community builders are going to be the highest paying jobs. And I think exactly because of this, that you don't have just like 2, 5, 10 LPs that maybe you send them a quarterly update. You probably have 50, 100 active contributors, venture contributors. And to just deal with so much like relationships, you need community managers, like people like myself who are transitioning from community building side to venture, but doing it in like a Web3 native community first approach. Um, so talking about barriers to entry, I also wanted to share a few words about what I've been working on with C Club Ventures, but generally I wanted to hear your thoughts about like, Mona, you already talked about like automation and on-chain hedge funds reducing the cost. How are you seeing the barriers to entry being reduced in like Web3 native funds? I know we could also YOLO a fund, just a multi-sig, but we're on stage. Hello, SEC. So I think let's talk about compliant legal ways that funds are being formed in a Web3 native way, but still lowering the barriers.
I feel like you've done the most legwork on this
Okay.
in maybe
a
the whole
question for yourself.
ecosystem at this point.
Okay, I'll just face this way. Yes. Let me answer that. So, one of the most interesting things with Web3 native funds is that they're being formed kind of as joint ventures or investment clubs. And this heavily reduces the risk because uh, LPs are not just passively trusting 2, 3 people for 10 years. They're supposed to be involved. So, and I think it's quite sensible from regulators, at least for now, we're kind of in this gray area, that the requirements for auditing and reporting and registrations are much lower. For example, the path that we're exploring, it's 1/10 the cost in Cayman Islands to set up an investment fund versus an investment club. So I think that makes a ton of sense. Uh, the other one is this idea of rage quit. It's not practical in illiquid assets, but it's more applicable, I think, to what Mona you're doing. So that's another one that instead of kind of needing like laws and regulations and like tons of like shareholder agreements, whenever you don't vibe with the group, you have the option to opt out. And I think that's really powerful. So what I hope to see is that the investment club regulations in US, Canada, Europe, not much, but Cayman Islands, they actually embrace this. Now we're just like being creative and using this kind of loophole to create Web3 native funds. But I think in future we will see potentially, at least in Cayman Islands, they're really forward thinking about this specific DAO fund regulations. In BVI and Cayman, they have this like incubator fund that's for early stage funds. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do the same for DAOs, and that would be amazing. But you guys also have experience in US with setting up a non-traditional fund, right?
Yeah, I think I've seen a range From, there are DAOs, if you ask them, what's your legal structure? They're like, we don't need one, we are decentralized. To the other extreme where, DAOs have incorporated like a traditional VC. What we've done is essentially incorporated as an LLC, and each DAO member is a partner in that LLC. And our investment decision-making process, we really made sure that it's distributed or decentralized. So there is a group of us that do the core work, which is, finding deals, connecting with founders, having pitch meetings, doing the due diligence. But we take all of that, write up an investment memo, pretty like standard, and then it goes to the DAO for voting. And the DAO makes a decision whether they want to invest in a particular company or not.
And so this is really interesting, but I think the challenge with hoping that everyone votes on everything is that most people will not do anything for most of the investment decisions. So what we're doing with our investment club structure is that certain sub-DAOs have a mandate, members vote on that, and then they have autonomy within the constraints of that mandate. They're kind of like layer two. So we have like Ethereum as layer one. It's kind of slow, but high trust, high security. And then you have these smaller sub DAOs on potentially Syndicate DAO, DAO House, different platforms that are expert in one thing. So I hope the future is not like one firm, I'm not gonna name names, one firm hiring everyone. It's that these are these DAOs of DAOs that have thousands of sub DAOs with their own focus, and they make investments in a decentralized way, but while having ownership and incentives for their own share of the pie, and then still maintaining ownership in kind of the layer one fund. I think that would be beautiful. We're working on it. Hopefully, everyone can adopt it. So a little bit changing the topic, I think what's interesting is that the implications of DAOs for the venture space is not just technical or financial, it's also around diversity. We were talking last night, one of the most interesting, I think you mentioned that could be your magical moment with like Anons. Yeah, so do you want to talk about that? So basically the question is like, what are the implications of Ventures 3.0 or like DAOs as investment vehicles for diversity in crypto and generally tech and venture?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's most interesting about people being anonymous right now is gender isn't a thing, and diversity is a different thing. I think we'll still end up having groups bifurcate, whether it's like crypto punks versus bored apes. I think we'll still find that humans unfortunately end up forming clans. But what it does do is it gives an equal playing field for groups that have been traditionally discriminated against. And so I've invested in some anonymous founders. I've never met them. I don't know if they're male or female. I'm in their discords, I'm in their communities. I love what they build, and it is totally irrelevant to me as an investor who they are in terms of like skin color, age, gender. And I think that is incredibly powerful to level the playing field.
I love that. I think, when we talk about diversity, we immediately talk about gender, but it goes beyond that. It's, race, age, even just backgrounds, having different opinions. And that's super important as we are building like the future of, internet. But how we are thinking about diversity is right now, if you look at venture funding, only 2.3% of venture funding goes to female founded companies. That's ridiculous. And there is data out there, there's research out there that female founded companies do better on many different metrics. They exit faster than male founded companies. So there is, it just makes financial sense, but still not a lot of female founded companies get funded. And I think one of the key reasons is because more than 65% of VC funds right now don't have a single female check writer. And I think those two stats are related where a VC, a female VC, is 2x more likely to fund a female-founded companies. So with Komorebi, our mission is to not just change like the founding landscape in crypto, we also want to change the funding landscape where we enable more women to angel invest, to invest in companies. And I think, right now we are doing a good job. We have more than like 70% of our DAO is female. So we are trying to disrupt like both sides, the VC side, but also like the founder side.
Uh, I wanted to also ask Mona how like you are contributing to this because everything's kind of unchained and the barrier to entry is so low, you don't need to have an existing network. You set up a fund instead of a fantasy fund. You can tell us more about it.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting angle. We from day one we've been building Enzyme in such a way that investors in a fund or in any kind of investment product, investment DAO or venture fund or whatever, can have a trustless relationship with the manager, which also means the manager could be anonymous. And I think that's very powerful because in traditional finance, you would never get anonymous managers. And the reason for that is because if there are so many risks when you invest in Web 2.0, misappropriation of funds, Madoff is a great example. And so, what we're building on Web3 is so exciting because it means that the numbers speak for themselves, the performance speaks for themselves. It's all provable, auditable, on-chain, and actually you can have this trustless relationship with an anonymous person whilst investing if you use a protocol like Enzyme. And we've, from day one, put a lot of thought and effort in how to enforce that kind of relationship through smart contracts.
Thank you. So to summarize, we talked about Ventures 3.0 as a new paradigm led by investment DAOs for Web 3.0. I hope that more firms will adopt this model, and I hope to see hundreds of more venture DAOs come to life in the next couple of years. We're almost out of time. I wish we could have time for questions, but you could post your questions on Twitter. I'll happily, and all of us, we're happy to interact on Twitter comments instead of here with these like amazing acoustics. So, thanks for listening, and hope you have a great evening. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.